Welcome to the Leadership Lessons podcast. Our guest today is Daniel C. Daniel is the founding director of Spacemakers, an organization providing training and coaching to individuals and teams to improve their productivity. And he's written a book called Spacemaker. We're going to talk a bit about that today, which I'm really looking forward to. The tagline is how to unplug, unwind, and think clearly in the digital age. And I understand that it's won a few awards at the Australian Business Book Awards last year, Daniel, for personal development as well as best tech book. So thanks for coming on, Daniel, and tell us a little bit about the book, mate.
Yeah, look, thanks for having me on the show, Caleb. So look, the book is really about helping busy leaders make space. So I'm a productivity and leadership consultant and have worked for years with executives and managers and just see how busy we all get and how we run to stand still and how actually there's often plenty of information and plenty of opportunities, but we lack space. And by that, I mean space to think, space to rest, space to reconnect with people who matter in our lives, friends and family, maybe space to address the inner life, to be at peace, just to not feel like we're running to stand still and rushed or fractured all the time. And if we are to make space in an age of constant technology, well, then I believe now that we need to be a bit more intentional in what it might look like. And that involves reframing our relationship with technology, coming up with a real sense of what technology is and how it's impacting our space. And then very
Yeah,
practically, what do we do about it? How do we shape our productivity and personal habits to make space day by day? So that's what the book's about,
really
and
good.
that's why I wrote it.
Really good, mate. And in the introduction, you talk about the key question that you're trying to answer, which is how to make space and be productive. And also how to be human. So, can you talk to us a bit about that? What did you mean by that? Productivity and humanity.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the book, I talk about this upside down curve because, again, I've got a productivity background. So, I actually started with the question, what is the relationship between productivity and technology? And are you still there?
Yep, yep, yep.
Oh, great. You just disappeared online. I'm sorry. What's the relationship between both? And clearly, you need to use lots of technology to be productive, and
Yes.
we need it in every field. But if you imagine an upside down graph, an upside down U, there comes a point where you reach this plateau where more technology doesn't make you endlessly productive. It simply means that you start to, uh, I suppose, get limited gains, more productivity. Uh, you reach a productive middle, and then you reach this point, which I call digital overuse, which is like sliding down that right side of the curve, where the more you use technology, if you're reaching for your phone first thing in the morning and last thing at night, if you're checking your phone
Yeah.
on the toilet, and really spend very little of your time offline, well, then it changes your mind, it changes your heart, your relationships, your habits. And I call that digital overuse. And the research is quite clear that actually it makes us less productive, less healthy, and less happy. So when I talk about humanity, there's an aspect of humanity that is lost when we are never disconnected, when we
Mm.
can't enjoy silence and enjoy our own thoughts rather than other people's thoughts, where
Mm.
we have to constantly have distraction and stimulation and activity in order to feel like we're moving rather than
Yeah.
being able to just simply be and enjoy just the wonder of rest or the presence of the moment.
Yeah.
And so I actually think unplugging and making space is about recapturing some of what makes us truly human again. And
Right.
that's actually part of what makes life worth living.
Definitely. So you talk about overuse of technology. Is anyone not overusing technology? Like it seems like the last 10 years since the introduction of the iPhone and just the phenomenal increase in automation just with digital and apps and all the things that we use and just the overload of information as well, 24/7 news cycle, whatever. I mean, is anyone really winning in your measure then, or are people just
Yeah.
trapped in it?
Yeah. Well, like I've got a mate called Matt who lives in country Tasmania, so he's winning, but apart from that, the rest of the world's not. So, no, but seriously, since COVID, and I put this in my book, I actually think that the graph has shifted where almost all of us, like you mentioned, are in what I would say is digital overuse. where
Yeah.
we are practicing the internet. We're using the internet like 9 to 12 hours a day on average as
Wow.
Australians. So 9 hours for the average Aussie and 9.4 hours, I think. The average Australian office worker is 12 hours a day online. So pretty much
Wow.
most of our life is connected, because we actually have to sleep, hopefully, at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and so yeah, that counts as digital overuse, and we're definitely seeing that where people feel like they're working harder, they're working longer hours. I mean, hybrid and remote teams is also up the ante. As
Mm.
amazing as hybrid working is from a flexible perspective and a life perspective, it's also easy then to wake up, reach for your phone, start emailing at the start of the day, not really
Yeah.
finish, to blur the boundaries even more between work and life and never really disconnect. And then
Yeah.
when you rest, you end up turning on Netflix or scrolling Instagram, so there's this sense where we never disconnect. And yeah, my message is that life works better. You're more productive, you're healthier and happier, again, from the research, if you can create patterns where you intentionally make space in your life to think clearly and restfully and reconnect with people by unplugging from tech, each day, each week, each year. And then you
Yeah.
can master tech. You can get the best out of the wonders and beauty and amazement of living in this tech saturated world, but not become broken and fractured and lose your
Yeah.
humanity in the process.
Well, what do you think it is about humans that struggle to control the impulse? I suppose, like, the classic, idea that Netflix essentially is competing with your sleep. Like, the greatest threat to Netflix is that you want to go to bed, and if they can keep you awake and binging, then they're going to make money out of you. Like, what is it about humans that we can't put the phone down? We can't stop watching the next show. We have to, be scrolling on social media and connecting with people we don't even kind of really know, and keeping track of high school friends from 25 years ago we don't really care about. Like, what is it about humans that we can't say no?
Yeah, it looks a big question. And I mean, I addressed it a lot in the first part of my book called The Paradigm, because I actually came to the conclusion, coaching different leaders, that you can give advice like, why don't you charge your phone outside of your bedroom and have some space at the start and end of each day so that you're not feeling addicted and always distracted. It's a
Yeah.
very simple idea, but it's really hard to do. And
Yeah.
so there's something that's happening in our stories, our brains, our mindsets that is stopping us from being able to feel comfortable disconnecting. And
Mm.
and so that's why we have to address the paradigm and understand technology quite deeply and fundamentally if we're then to do the simple things that help us to unplug and make space. So that
Yeah.
there are a number of ways to look at it. I mean, I haven't spent a lot of time focusing on, let's say, the stuff that is increasingly out there, like Cal Newport and others, or movies like The Social Dilemma talk about the addictive fundamental design of the technologies we use.
Yeah.
They are built on behavioral conditioning, where you're using variable rewards and flashing lights and sounds, social kind of cues like likes and hearts. All of this stuff is designed by billion-dollar research
Mm.
arms to make you addictive. So on the one hand, the question of, well, why are humans getting addicted to highly addictive substances? Well, I mean, that's because they're designed to be that way.
Yeah.
It's kind of like asking
That's
the
what's
question, why do
it's
cocaine addicts get addicted to cocaine? Well, there's something about morphine that actually makes you addicted.
yeah.
Sorry, what were you going to say?
It's so unethical. Like, that's the problem, isn't it? Like I think seems to be a growing sense of this isn't really ethical. This is capitalizing or taking advantage of the human condition in order to make money, essentially. Do you
Oh,
think people are
absolutely.
waking up to that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I like, Mark Sayers talks about I think it's digital capitalism, the idea that you've kind of got the right wing where it's, big money, big capital, kind of corporate arm stuff, which is a perfect merger with the left, which is individuals wanting to be individuals and express themselves individually. You put
Mm.
that together in big tech, and individuals think that they're expressing themselves individually, but really they're just making money for global corporates.
Mm. It won't say.
And so, yeah, there's definitely some unethical stuff there. But look, again, the message I would really like to share is not one of gloom and brokenness, because there's also a lot of good that comes out of technology.
Definitely.
I don't believe that I don't believe that Mark Zuckerberg, set out to destroy humanity.
No.
I think that I think there's good and bad mixed up in people's intentions, even if they haven't necessarily understood the consequences of some of, let's say, adding the share button, for example,
Yeah.
because the world is complex and yeah. But what I did in my book is I tried to focus more on the spiritual, sociological, and neurological reasons why we're so drawn to technology, even
Yeah.
beyond the addictiveness of the design. Because I think at the heart of it all is story, and the stories we tell ourselves, the values that we get out of the technologies, and without an awareness of why we're drawn to it, what it's doing to our brains, what it's doing to our heart, then it's
Mm.
very hard then to change your habits and make space. Space is a social phenomenon. It's not just a reality of our world, and we have a
Yeah.
choice to make space or not make space, but we
Mm.
have to be aware of what's happening first.
Very good. Very good. So, what's the story then, Daniel? What's the common story you come across as you coach people, you help people? What are people telling themselves when it comes to space and life and hurry and rhythm and being human?
Yeah.
Or like, what's the common story? Could you put that together for us?
Look, I think there are lots of stories. It's probably not as simple as a story, but look, one common story I think that we tell. Which way shall I go? Yeah, look, I talk about the stories of freedom and choice in the book. The idea that actually we have this narrative in our culture and America, and the UK, where freedom is defined as the ability to do what you want when you want. That
Mm.
we're free as individuals if we can express our heart and follow our feelings, and not have anybody or any institution, any group of people tell us how we should express ourselves or what we should feel. Which is beautiful to a point. If I went to communist China, I would probably start preaching that people need to have more
Yeah.
self-expression, or at least maybe in a deep Islamic culture, that women should have more freedom to express themselves and to have jobs that they like and to know their uniqueness. But in our culture, it's in overdrive, and I think we're hyper individualized, where we're just disconnected and fractured from even our own families, because we can't sync our schedules, because our time is our own and everything is free. And so I think unless we can challenge freedom and ask, is freedom really doing what you want when you want? Or is freedom the ability to create life-giving, healthy limits in your life? And it's in those limited spaces you actually find freedom. Then I
Yeah.
think it'll be very hard to unplug. Uh,
Yeah.
and so practically, we know this is true, let's say with debt. If freedom is defined as spend what I feel like and follow my heart, well, then of course I'm always going to fly to Italy, and then I'll end up broke and in debt.
Yeah.
And then now I'm in my 40s, but let's say I did that now. If I'm in my 60s, well, I have no pension. I mean, I
Yeah.
have no
Yeah.
retirement fund, and I'm broke and I'm in debt. You know what I mean? So it doesn't
Mm.
lead to freedom. It leads to actually enslavement.
Yeah.
Following your heart with food. I used to be a physiotherapist. If you just eat what you feel like, well, then of course I'm going to grab what's on the bottom shelf at Woolworths, aren't I? And just keep
Yeah.
eating that stuff every day and not exercising. But it doesn't lead to energy and life and health. The same is true with freedom when it comes to digital tech. And
Yeah.
uh, true freedom isn't doing what you want with tech. It's actually having very specific life-giving limits where we unplug and put restrictions on our time in
Yeah.
order to enjoy the best of the online world, and yet still express the breadth and
Right.
depth of life beyond a screen. That's just one of the many stories that we probably need to
I love
tell.
it. Yeah. So what you're really saying, Daniel, is there's a misunderstanding of freedom and individualism, if you like, in our culture. We've kind of gone beyond maybe the healthy understanding of what it is to be free and have free choice and be autonomous. And essentially, it's become we're just oversaturated in selfishness in a way, aren't we? And maybe lost the art in a way, or lost the understanding of how to restrain in a way that's healthy. Because, like you say, very easy examples with overeating, overspending. It's fascinating. One of my questions for you is with the whole space making idea. I think it's in the same vein of what we're talking about. Well, if you help people make space, how will they not just abuse the space? How do you not just, because I think everyone would say, yes, I need space in my life. So let's say we create that space. How does not that just not get abused again and fall into we're just watching more movies, or just using, maybe it's not technology, but we just switch to something else that's time wasting and unhealthy and not bringing true freedom.
Yeah, look, I mean, well, firstly, I think space has value in itself. And when we have space, at least the question of what do we fill it with is a good moral and reflective question. But I also think that, um, well, this is why we need the principles. So I start with the paradigm of
Yeah.
technology, then I move, so why we need to shift our understanding, our mindset. Then what are the principles, which is a section about, well, what do we orientate our time around? Because, Stephen Covey says there's no point saying no without a greater yes. He's a productivity guru who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective Things. And so you never want to say no to something without finding the greater yes. So I'm like, what is the greater yes? I talk
Mm.
about the value of deep rest and what that looks like. I talk about the value of interpersonal community, like I think I called it concrete or connected community. So the idea of real in-person relationships again, not just relationships online, and how fundamental that is for our health and happiness from the research perspective.
Yeah.
And I talk about silence and solitude, addressing the inner life, being able to reflect on who we are and where we're heading. So there needs to be a greater yes that we fill our time with. I agree with that. And
Can
then
you
I
can
move to
you
the
talk us through
practices.
the can you
Yeah.
talk us through the acronym? So you use SPACE as an acronym for that middle section there about the principles. Can you just quickly talk us through that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I used an acronym of SPACE simply because it made sense. And
Brilliant.
when I wrote down the principles that I really thought were important, I think 3 of the 5 already had the S and the P and the E. So I'm like, I'm sure I can find a way of changing the other 2 so they fit.
I love it.
Uh, so set limits, plan patterns, assign rest, cultivate community, and embrace silence. So the
Right.
idea of setting limits is that we need to be able to understand what are the constructive limits to tech that give us life, and how do we create life-giving limits in tech like we would with spending or exercise or relationships, etc. Plan patterns is the idea that we need to have predictable patterns in our life. So how do you create patterns where you're unplugging and making space, like a spiritual discipline, like a habitual practice, so that you're actually prioritizing space rather than work and clutter day by day, week by week, year by year.
Yeah.
And then the last 3 are really values, the importance of deep rest and the difference between that versus watching Netflix, active leisure versus passive leisure. We talk about what deep rest is and how you might achieve it and
Mm.
attain it. Talk about cultivating community and the enormous body of research that says that people live longer and are happier and healthier when they have lots of interpersonal face-to-face connections. And I challenge the social media narrative in the sense that it has its value being online and connecting socially, but it cannot reproduce the benefits that we see in the research for face-to-face. So we shouldn't trade too much of one for the other.
Yeah.
And then embrace silence is the idea that our inner life, we're spiritual people, and the inner life is so important. And I find that so many of us are running on empty, and our outer actions are not fueled by a deep peace or an inner life. And yeah, I have a faith background as well. And so I see the importance of being able to be still and
Definitely.
be at rest, and to uh, be able to confront some of your own brokenness in order to actually be a healthier, less insecure person. And yeah, you can't run from yourself, and you need space to know yourself and then do the inner work that leads to more
Really
peace.
good. It sounds like you're talking about my 2022, mate. Like I've probably, without reading your book earlier in the year, I've started to touch on some of that. So coming out of the lockdowns, my wife and I were quite aware that the flood of busyness and life was going to come back pretty quick,
Mm.
and we'd spent 280 days in our house over 2020 and 2021. And so the first thing we did was put in a full day of rest a week, which in our Christian tradition we call a Sabbath.
Mm.
Um, and the big thing that my kind of mantra for the year was depth through silence. So I really just wanted to practice silence like I never had before and focus on deepening, I suppose, my soul and my relationships and resting and all those kind of things. But it's a great challenge. I've had to get off social media. Like I basically haven't looked at social media this year, and neither has my wife. I don't think that I want it to be like that forever, but I really had to I suppose, readdress my relationship with social media and TV and technology, and the only way to do that was to put in periods of rest and silence, I suppose, to fill the space, as I'm understanding now. And your book has really helped take all of those little first baby steps um, a lot deeper and a lot further. And I love the stuff about the holidaying and all of that, because that's something I've been thinking about with this summer coming up, having a much more planned, restful holiday. So I said to my wife this morning, we need to study this section of the book and nail our holiday coming up, which is actually down in Tassie. We're going to be down in Tassie over the Christmas period. So yeah, no, really, really good, mate. So I'm right with you. I totally agree, and I think it's such a book that we needed. So, well, why do people struggle though to slow down? Like all the things you talk about in this part three of the book, the principles, are really about slowing down. You know, how's our hurried, busy lives, I suppose, affecting our souls in your opinion, and why is it difficult to slow down and be human, to use your language?
Hmm. You're asking big questions, Caleb. Why is it hard to slow
You're the
down?
expert, mate. Come on.
There are so many reasons. I talk about the idols of the heart and why we find meaning in activity and overwork. I mean, I love a research study, and I actually do start one of my key sections in the practices with this from a guy called Timothy Wilson in the University of Virginia. He did this study where he got participants to be in a room by themselves for 6 to 15 minutes, and he just said, think about your own thoughts without any distractions. So no technology was in the room, and he asked people to describe that experience of thinking, and uh, a large proportion of people found it a painful experience. That was their adjective. So he wanted
Wow.
to know, well, what does he mean? But what do they mean by painful? So he wanted a comparison. So he started to give another cohort of people electric shocks, which was so painful that they would pay $5 or more not to be zapped again. And then he put them in a room and said, think your own thoughts for 6 to 15 minutes, no distraction, just reflect on what the silence. And he had the zapping machine in the room. He said, look, don't zap yourself, but if you really wanted to, I suppose you're welcome to. And 67% of men and 25% of women chose to give themselves painful electric shocks rather than sit alone with themselves and
Wow.
reflect on their own thoughts. Now, that, in my mind, describes at least a symptom of a culture which has lost the ability to be silent,
Mm.
where we've lost our ability, or we're losing our ability to simply just pay attention and to be okay with painful feelings or boredom, to let our mind wander and not to have to suddenly look something up, some piece of information on the internet, uh, whenever we think of a new idea, and to actually focus our mind so that we can gain attention once more. So uh, that's what we're fighting for. When I talk about humanity, I
Wow.
think we're kind of losing our mind in some ways if we're
Mm.
not able to think our own thoughts. And if you can only hear other people's thoughts, well, A, you live a fairly angry or superficial existence. And secondly, I think you end up living by other people's scripts. You end up with, we're all individuals, so we all get tattoos.
Yeah, yeah,
We're
yeah.
all self-expressing ourselves, so we all watch exactly the same movies on Netflix and have exactly the same worldview, because we're all individuals. Do you know what I mean? Like, you end up living the script of the culture around you if you don't have the ability to make space and
So
think
true.
about your own thoughts. Listen to the Spirit of God to actually pay attention to who you are and what you're meant to do with your life. And that
Yeah.
takes courage in a day where we're all distracted.
Yeah, it's really good, mate. Can I push you a bit more on that? Get a bit more specific. So, big. Where I think we're both around 40ish, and living through my 30s, and journeying through with different mates, and just I'm a pastor, so I deal with a lot of people every day, and counselling, things like that. But an interesting feature that I've noticed, I don't know if it's just my world, but it's just men in their 30s breaking down. And I know we've had COVID, and in Victoria that was dramatically impacting on people's mental health. But even before that, just men hitting walls, men that are busy, work hard, but they're good guys. They love their family.
Mm.
Many of them I know through church, Christian circles, but just hitting walls and not, I suppose, understanding how to maybe navigate this hurry culture that we have, the tech. I think men particularly get drawn into the news cycle. Like it kind of in some ways maybe appeals to men a little bit more to women to be able to know everything, to be able to read every article, to be able to follow every bit of politics from every corner of the globe, plus the share market, plus what's happening in global sport, plus everything. And I just wonder if you have any thoughts around that with men around our age and how the lack of space maybe is affecting them particularly.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I don't know if it's specifically men. I think men and women tend to have different reasons they break down, and they break down in different ways. I mean, I've certainly burnt out myself in my 30s, very similarly. It
Okay.
was one of the reasons I started a company called Making Space, because I was a physiotherapist, I was working as a pastor, I was also starting a hobby company. I was doing too much. I was building a house. I had young kids, and I just didn't stop. And eventually, I started having breathing problems. And I started being breathless at the dinner table, and then breathless reading books to my kids. And I'm just like, wow, this is quite scary. And
Wow.
after a bunch of tests, there was nothing wrong with my lungs or my heart. It was anxiety
Yeah.
and overwork. And uh, I saw another friend of mine who broke down a few months before and actually ended up in hospital, and probably took 3 years to almost recover. He's never been the same since. And I
Wow.
just thought, actually, there's a point where I have to accept my limits and accept that actually I need to not only stop working so much, but also give attention to what's happening in my heart, my soul, my inner life, um, to pay attention to prayer. And uh, at that time, I didn't get counseling. I have had some since, but I got mentoring, and I've created rhythms in my life, put things in place where I could actually start to slow down enough where my soul could catch up to my activity, and
Yes.
where I could start to live from the inside out rather than the outside in. And so, yeah, I don't have any wise, sage advice for men, but I do think we need space, and you can't outrun stress and
Yeah.
busyness and fear and anxiety. You actually need to be able to, in my language, let God actually speak into your life, or to at least give yourself the space to start to recognize what's going on, and surrender some of that, and
Mm.
to work out what's happening from the inside out.
Mm. Really good, mate, and appreciate you sharing a bit of honesty there. Yeah, you're spot on. It definitely starts on the inside and with the soul. And something that's really impacted me the last couple of years is just Jesus' call to come, all who are weary and heavy burdened, and I'll give rest for your soul. Like, it's just been a whole new insight to that call of Christ to come to Him and find rest for your soul. And I've definitely been, and probably still am, working on just being a performer, a workaholic. I just trying to, I still think I'm 22 and I can run through brick walls physically, emotionally, mentally, and I just can't anymore. I've had a lot of physical issues the last few years, and that's mainly come from an inability to embrace my limits in different ways, and even just to let go of sport, and just, so like even this year, just embracing those limits. And I've shared it in a couple of sermons, and my congregation has laughed at me, but that's okay. And it's just learning to let things go, and it's a real challenge. Eventually, you come to that place where you have to understand in your heart that you're not strong enough, and you're not big enough, and you're not smart enough.
Mm,
And you're right. Your life will catch up with you if you don't tend to the inside, to the inner stuff. And it's not very popular in our culture, and no one's really talking much about it or encouraging much about it. So I think again, your book is just absolutely brilliant. So, where would you suggest, Daniel, to start? Like, if you could, anyone, the third section of your book is kind of the practical bit, but if anyone could do anything, or just, I think we need to be talking baby steps.
mm.
If someone was just going to start, what would you suggest putting into place?
Yeah, look, I think start with awareness to begin with. I talk about a digital audit in the book where maybe just start writing down all the things that you do day by day and work out what are the habits in your life.
Mm.
What do you do when you first wake up? What app do you press habitually once you've turned off your alarm clock? What do you do when you're in the shower and the toilet, and what are you doing when you're having your first coffee in the morning? And just get a sense of what are the habits you think are helpful and what are the ones that have just been adopted because of behavioral conditioning or just random choice. Because then you can work out, well, how might I then address those at a small step practical level?
Yeah,
Um, Another way is to have a 1 day fast. So turn off your tech for a full day, all tech, no
yeah,
phones, no screens, no laptops. Maybe tell people you're going to do it, but basically have a day where you have no screens and actually just experience your feelings. Work
mm,
out what are you missing? How do you feel? Are you panicked? Are you concerned? Do you keep habitually reaching for your pocket whenever you have a moment? That'll again give you some biofeedback on your own heart and habits and whether you're in digital overuse and what are the things that are actually drawing you. What are you missing?
yeah,
Uh, but very, very practically, if you want just one or two tips, I just reckon starting and ending the day without tech is a great start. Charge your phone
yeah,
outside your bedroom and make space to think and reflect at the end of the day, and to just maybe even talk to your partner, your spouse who's in bed next to you rather than playing
ah,
Candy Crush and
wow,
watching, scrolling Facebook. Like have
yeah,
pillow talk again and actually connect with people in your life.
yeah,
And then when you wake up, rather than just hitting an alarm and suddenly pressing an app, well, what if you were to just, for me, I pray, I think, I reflect on the day that's coming up, and I think about what I'd like to say or what I'd like to do or be.
yeah,
I write in my thankfulness journal 3 things I'm thankful for. I read a bit of scripture. So, I mean, however you want to do it, it's so valuable to start and end the day with your thoughts and not with like bad news from the Ukraine or
yeah,
work emails that have come in or advertising, shoes that have come in from America at 6 in the morning to your inbox.
yeah.
So, something as simple as that can make a huge difference. And there are so many other little tips in my book, like a
What's
digital
your
free meal, etc.
what's your favorite or your go-to practice at the moment for you and your family? What's really working right now?
Look, the most important one, and this is the black belt practice. So you talk about small steps, well, they're things like a digital free meal or a digital free car trip. But look, the black belt ninja practice is to have a digital free day off every week, which I call a Sabbath too, a digital Sabbath, where I orientate a whole day around rest and reflection. And we've
Mm,
really planned and structured how to rest deeply and what it means to connect as family and connect at a heart and renewal kind of physical level as well. Like rest takes practice. But
yes,
I have a day every Friday night to Saturday night. I have no tech. Sometimes I watch TV with the kids because we've decided that's like family time, and so it's connection. But anything that looks and feels like work, which for me is typing, swiping, communicating online, writing emails, being on social media, that's what I do for work. Like I'm a
yeah,
communicator, I'm a speaker, I'm a author, a trainer.
yeah,
Well, if I'm going to have a day off work, well, then I need to not do that. And that means I need
yeah,
a day without the internet. And that
yeah.
has been the most life giving, joy filled practice that has changed our life. Uh, and my wife and family would say the same thing. It keeps us strong and keeps us solid, but it's not easy. Yeah. So
No,
that's my big go to practice. But I know that's a big change for many people.
no, it's good. We're on that as well. We start Saturday morning. So I've still got a baby. We've got 4 kids and one's a baby, so it's a challenge, and it's
Mm.
super messy and not perfect at all, and far from
Mm-mm.
ideal. But I think that's the beauty of Sabbath, where we're at as a young family, is more just giving it a crack. And the thing
Oh
I've
yeah.
found, probably, I'd be really interested to hear what you found most impacting on the journey. But for us, it's probably this year. It's probably just been having a bit of time to read together as a family and then just reflect. Often we read a Christian book. We're reading through the Pilgrim's Progress at the moment. And that's just been so powerful because as a parent, it's a classic. I suppose this is the idea of this of Spacemakers. It's this classic thing as a parent where you want time with your children, you want to teach them things, you want to do deep things, but there's always a complaint of you're too busy and there's no space and blah blah blah. And the Sabbath or the day off a week naturally creates all this space, and you can actually do what you actually want to do as a parent and train your child and talk to them and have quality time and go into deeper things. And so for me, that's one of the things we're enjoying at the moment. But what about you guys? What's been good and works really well?
Yeah, and we're in a different stage of life, and that really does make a difference. So I think Sabbath is a journey. It's one where you commit to principles and to planning it, to uncommitting to as many commitments as you can so that you're planning spontaneity, so we can wake up in summer and we have no plans because there's no sport because we made that decision to have no sport. And we say no to a lot of birthday parties because we want to have this kind of day off. So there's a lot of planning that comes into spontaneity, but I love
Yeah,
waking up and the kids actually do watch Netflix in the morning, which they love. They get 2 hours, and I sleep in or read books. I
yeah,
love chainsawing, actually, chainsawing or exercising. Maybe it's a Tassie thing, but I've got lots of land, and there's nothing like chainsawing. You have to meditate, you have to focus. You
wow,
get outdoors, you get physical. I get to see some immediate results to what I do, and all of that
yeah,
is completely the opposite to the type of work I do. And
mm,
so it's like it doesn't feel like work; it feels like rest.
definitely,
And yeah, and then obviously I play board games or spend time with my family. We'll see
yeah,
friends who are low energy, but we don't see friends who are high energy.
yeah,
Uh, and so we've worked out what are the activities for an introvert and extrovert. I'm introverted, my wife's an extrovert. How do we somehow navigate this space and intentionally plan a day of rest? That
right,
is, like you said, we're making it up. And there are some days that like that wasn't a Sabbath or that didn't feel like a Sabbath.
yeah.
But more often than not, it's a place where I was like, oh, thank goodness I had this day off, and it is the one that regenerates us for the next week. Um,
Right. What do the kids love the most? What do your kids love the most?
Look, I think they love time with family. They love doing stuff together. They complain when I say let's go out and go to the beach or go for a walk, and then they love it. There's
Yeah,
this kind of love-hate relationship with doing the
kids.
physical, active, relational things. They do like because they have tokens. They've got a token system, so they can use 10 hours of screen time per week as they like.
Mm,
But they get two to 2.5 hours on a Saturday, which is more, and they can do different stuff than they can do during the week. So they enjoy that. And we just eat food. We eat like sweet stuff. It's dessert on Saturday because it's Sabbath. It's like, yay, Sabbath. Let's eat crap. So it's like,
yeah,
woo. So, I don't know. I haven't actually asked them what they like, but I know they like time with us.
yeah. No, that's good. It's really good. You speak about holidays, and I suppose there's a Sabbath or a restful element to holidays if you can do them well. And I love the stuff, as I said at the beginning, about planning holidays and having a purpose to them. I think that particularly challenging for me because I think we've had this great value of holidays, but I think intentionality around them is probably the next step for us as a family, so that they're truly restful. Can you talk to us a bit about that and how that works and making a holiday something that is a space maker and a time that gives true rest?
Yeah, I look at the research about how the busiest people in society often don't use all their annual leave. And when we do take holidays, they're not often that restful because we maybe travel lots or we do it in a way that just doesn't feel restful, or we just have obligations to go visit family in different places, etc. And so again, I just encourage us to put, the principle is to assign rest before work. That's one of my space principles. The
Mm,
A is to assign rest before work. So, what does it mean to prioritize rest before work? So, weekly, that would be Sabbath. Daily,
mm,
that would be something like, journaling or exercise or a bit of meditation is something that is restful. And then you put your work around it. From an annual perspective, one of the practices is booking your holidays at the start of the year before you book your work. And so that's what we do.
very
We
good.
actually really got ahead this year. We're trying to book our holidays for next year, which seems a bit overkill, but with my current work, I'm getting booked up 9 months ahead. So I want to make sure that my holidays always come before my clients,
Yeah, well
and
done.
that we think about what type of holidays will be restful in different seasons. Uh,
Mhm.
so, like in January, we have more active, fun, adventure type stuff. In August, when we're really tired and cranky because it's been a long, dark Tassie winter, we like to just have a fire and walk on the beach and play board games and be quiet. So it's again about being intentional in what is rest truly for you and your family, and making sure you prioritize the space before you prioritize the work. And that goes through lots of different patterns. Yeah.
That's a great principle, mate. I love that. And yeah, I think that's something that I could do better and a lot of people could do better. So just maybe as we bring it to a bit of an end, we do try and orientate a bit of the podcast around leadership. Why is this concept of space making so critical for people that are leaders, whether that's as a parent, leaders in business, in the church world? Why is it so critical for leadership, do you think?
A guy called Jamin Fraser runs the Insecurity Project, and I like his research or his framework that he's shown that leaders who are very type A but insecure, who basically are internally insecure, they tend to do really well in leadership for the first 20 years. So you see those type of leaders kind of get to the top of their game and get fairly high positions in their 20s and 30s because they just work so hard. They're so active, and they do what they can to overcome their insecurity basically through external performance. And
Mm,
then they become complete nightmares to work under in their 40s and 50s because they're leading from a place of deep insecurity. And those leaders that are just horrible people because and they display a whole lot of narcissistic tendencies and personality traits, or they burn out.
mm,
Whereas people who actually examine the inner life, who are more peace-filled, who pay attention to their soul, may not achieve as much in the early years, but they tend to thrive in the later years, and they're the ones
mm.
you want to follow. So in terms
Interesting.
of leadership, my summary is space making is about learning to lead yourself. And if you can't learn to lead yourself, if you don't know who you are, if you're not able to confront your own demons and also have a real sense of how you're wired and who you are and who you're made to be, then you can't be a leader. Because if
Yeah.
you can't lead yourself, you shouldn't lead others. And therefore, you need space to start with self.
Yeah, really good. How much do you think we've lost, I suppose, in the hurriness, the busyness, this, high performance type attitude? I see a lot of that, whether that's high performance as a leader or a small business owner or in a church, or even men, as we are talking about before. There's this expectation on that people kind of put on themselves to be a high performer, and I suppose you probably see a lot of that working in the productivity space. Um, how much of that, I suppose, gets a little bit lost, or overshadows the need for character? That's what I'm trying to get to. Because what you're really saying, or an element of the inner life, is actually focusing on character formation and deep formation, as opposed to focusing on performance, which you could consider as external, or getting things done or being competent, or maybe for the insecure leader, faking it to appear
Hmm.
competent and in control. So, yeah, what do you think of that?
Oh, look, we definitely have an Instagram culture where what we look like on the outside has much more relevance than what we look like on the inside. If you look at the productivity and leadership books from the 1900s compared to what we have now, it's almost all about what you do on the outside now,
Mm,
and how you perform and how you can manage yourself, as opposed to character formation and faith and spiritual formation,
mm,
contemplation, which was the older books. So yeah,
interesting.
I mean, look, I am a follower of Jesus, and so that's my tradition, and I definitely believe in prayer and scripture and listening to God's voice, and
Yeah,
that's how I've been shaped in character formation. Um, but somehow we need to get to the point where we know that we're loved and accepted and forgiven and okay, and we also are aware of our brokenness and all the stuff that we do that is just stupid
yeah,
or habitually unhelpful, and to
yeah,
come to peace with that as well, so that we can come to peace with it in others, and all
yeah,
that involves space for the inner life.
yeah. No, well said. And that's probably the problem why people don't want to create space, because it's hard to look at
Mm.
yourself, and it's very uncomfortable to embrace your limits and your brokenness. And but there's a great art in that. It's counterintuitive, I suppose, but the ability to do that really does set you on course for the long haul, and as you said, to be effective even in the later life or as a parent or, really, really good, mate. Just as we finish, what's if you were going to give a tip to an aspiring leader in this area of space making, what would be your tip or your great leadership lesson?
No, I just think of Stephen Covey, who says, "Begin with the end in mind."
Mm,
And so, yeah, create the patterns and habits and space in your life now, because there's no point creating an amazing business, having an amazing team, making a whole heap of money if you are a shell of a person at the end of it and have a broken marriage and broken relationships and have got chronic pain because you're sick all the time, So start with the end in mind, put in space from the very beginning, and trust that somewhere along the way that space leads to the types of life you want to live.
very good, very good. And what's next for you, mate? You were saying you've got a book launch coming up.
Yeah, so on the 1st of December, my next book comes out. Very excited about it. It's a parenting book called Raising Tech Healthy Humans: How to Reset Your Children's Tech Habits and Give Them a Great Start to Life. So pretty
Super.
much whenever I speak around, the world on leadership and space making, the first question people ask has nothing to do with anything I've spoken about. It's always, well, what about my kids? Or when should I give my kids a phone? Or, how do I help my kids make space? And I'm like, I was talking to you. But with that in mind, I've spent a lot of time looking at what might this look like for parents and kids, and how do you set up kids with great tech habits in the first early years of life, primary school and even pre-primary, so that they have a healthy brain and healthy habits, and you have a better start to life. So I'm super
Brilliant.
excited about that. 1st of December is the launch on Amazon,
Right.
and look out for the book.
Mate, absolutely critical. I'm sure it's going to be a bestseller because it is the big question, and it's crazy time because we're the first generation that's had to deal with tech like this, and so the big concern is our kids, and incredibly, kids are just absolutely attracted to screens. It's amazing. They just would rather do nothing else than sit there. So yeah, really good, mate. Really appreciate your efforts in writing Spacemakers and in writing this next book, and really serving the community and serving people well by helping us answer questions that we all have. So it's been great having you on the podcast.
No, look, thank you so much. I appreciate the conversation.
I trust you were impacted by that Leadership Lessons podcast. I would love to hear your thoughts about today's podcast. Please comment down below, and please review the podcast and share it with a friend. Doing this inspires us and helps others to find the podcast. See you next time.